There we go. Right. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well,
We are here to talk to you about ethical filmmaking, which we're very
sorry.
excited about. If anyone's got their microphone on, can you just make sure it's switched off, please? And yeah, like I said, we're going to get straight into it. But to begin with, I'm just going to show you a really quick video about who we are, the Saltways, and kind of our approach to filmmaking, which will hopefully give a bit of context to why we're here today talking about ethical filmmaking.
There is a tendency in some documentary filmmaking and in the charity sector for you to be viewing someone through a lens, which you are practically, but you want the feeling when you're telling ethical storytelling that you're with someone and they're telling you their story, and it's done with respect.
Give people space and time because those are the two most important things. And I think just treating the story with respect is really important to me.
If you want people to care, then you just let someone see the human behind the story.
Great. So, if in case you don't know, I'm Emma Bracegirdle. I'm the founder of the Saltways, and we make ethical and effective films for the third sector. And I'm really happy today to be joined by Nina, who is from Agenda Alliance, which is a wonderful organisation that we've worked with recently. So I am going to Sorry, I'm just letting people in at the same time. So today we're going to be talking about what is ethical filmmaking, and this is all relevant to the third sector. So everything we talk about, hopefully you'll all be able to take something from. Then Nina's very kindly going to talk about what that means for in practice for them as an organisation. And then we're going to touch on trauma-informed practice, a bit about consent and what that means in practice, some interview techniques if you are interviewing people that you wanted to approach that ethically, supporting people to capture their own stories using their phones, and then we're hopefully going to leave a good chunk of time at the end for some questions and answers. Feel free to put things in the chat throughout as and when they come up, but we'll wait until the end to answer them. But if there's anything we haven't answered in that period, then of course we'll cover it in an email follow-up after. And we are recording the session, so don't feel like you have to frantically take notes, because hopefully you can watch it back if needed. So at the crux of it, ethical filmmaking to us is creating content that puts the interest of contributors, especially those with lived experience, at the centre. And everything we talk about really today is what that means in practice. But really, when you come back to it, it is all about that. It's thinking about whose interests am I putting at the front here? Is it ours as an organisation? Is it mine as the comms person? Is it, is it the trustees? Is it people that donate to us? Or is it the people who's sharing their story? Is it the people that we represent? So everything should really come within that umbrella. And I know that can feel quite difficult and overwhelming and not knowing how to do it. But hopefully by the end of this session, you'll have a good understanding of how to actually do that in practice. So there's some key principles that we talk about when we're doing ethical filmmaking, and that is firstly co-creation. We like to co-create on all of our projects, and that can be something from as little as making sure that you speak to people who are going to be featured in the film and ask them, where would you like to be filmed? Is there anything you're not comfortable talking about? What time would you even like us to be there? Or, is there anything in terms of the messaging that we're going to be covering this film that you feel passionate about, or you feel like actually isn't very relevant to you and your experiences? So that can be like co-creation on a very small level. That's kind of the basics to us, all the way through to working with people with lived experience to make sure they really help shape the content and they're actually there with you as a respective creative within the process, rather than kind of just turning up and filming them and then leaving. So really co-creation means working in partnership with people with lived experience at every single stage of the process. And that's in the pre-production, so the planning, the production when you're actually creating the film, and then the post-production when you're actually asking them about, are you happy with this? Are you comfortable with the edit that we've made? Is there anything in there that you'd like to be removed? So it's, yeah, every single stage of the process, you're involving experts with lived experience. The second is power dynamics. So just really, and I think this is just understanding what the power dynamics are. And traditionally, you as people who are creating content, or if your charity is having a film made, you and the filmmakers do have that power. So it's making sure that actually you treat people with lived experience and the people who are sharing their stories as the experts, and they should really be given the voice and control, and the power should be shifted towards them. So their voice should be really the center, and they should be the ones in power of their story and in control of their story. And you really are there to facilitate it and make sure it's treated and done in a way that's respectful. Transparency is our third principle, and that is that you should be transparent throughout the whole process. So even when you're first speaking to people about, would you be interested in being part of this film, or would you be able to contribute towards the messaging? You tell them exactly how that's going to be used, what their information.
So day one, yes.
And you maintain that throughout. So again, even things like this film is going to be used on social media, website, it's going to be out for 2 years, but it will stay on the internet forever. We're going to pull images from this, we're going to use it as fundraising, we're going to use it in things. So anybody who's contributing to your content should have a really good understanding of what it is that it's going to be used for, and that should be maintained throughout. So even if it's, oh, this is the edit that we made, we weren't sure about that bit, and actually now we're going to delay the launch, they really should feel like they're part of the team and part of the process, and that there's nothing being hidden, or there's nothing that's sort of a grey area, because again, that can destroy trust. And it's all about that power as well, because at that point, when you do that, then the power dynamic is shifting to you rather than the people with lived experience. And then lastly, and most importantly, I think, is to just let authenticity and truthfulness shine through. And yes, that's scary. And yes, you need to be ready to embrace the unexpected. And I'm sure Nina's going to talk about it, but with co-creation, you can't have all the control, and it is daunting, and you have to give it time, but you get the best content. It's just always so much more ethical, authentic, engaging. And you'll see that your engagement with your supporters, as well as the people that you work with, is just on a different level than if it's something like a traditionally produced film. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you the film that we worked on with the Gender Alliance. And after that, Nina's going to talk through the process from their perspective. It's a longish film, it's sort of 4 minutes, but I feel like you probably won't even notice that because it's so engaging. But yeah, I'll show it first and I'll let Nina talk you through it after.
I've got trauma. I know what I went through my trauma, but nobody's trying to listen. But at least, why not give them or give us a listening ear and put yourself in our shoes that minute to know what we are facing.
We want to be listened to, but nobody's willing to take a chance because I'm in recovery, because I've got that stigma. So I've gone from a stigma of being an addict, being in and out of prison, got all that against me, and now I've got it against me because I'm in recovery, when really people in recovery should be celebrated.
I remember years ago, I was homeless. I slept on the bus. Bus 12 is a 24-hour bus in London. It was so difficult for me in terms of getting support. It's not something I really want to remember. You know, somebody seeing you for the first time and you just said, okay, I think we're running out of time. Okay, so where do we start from? Oh, you don't have an ID, you don't have a status. Okay, let me just ask you this question. Why not just go back to your country? That was what I got. And you know, when I heard that, my head went blank. You don't know if my country is safe. You don't know the reason why I'm here in the first place. You don't know if I'm running from someone. You know nothing about me.
Some of the most common patterns we see in women being failed by public services is this lack of a trauma-informed approach. If you think of like the worst thing that's ever happened to you, or your worst day, and how you've interacted with services on that day. And you're facing that trauma, but without support of a family, a partner, without an income, perhaps without somewhere to live. The way you interact with the world is really different, but a lot of public services fail to take this into account.
It was a judge that said, has this woman ever been to rehab? It wasn't anyone else. For 32 years I've been heroin and crack addict. Nobody had ever said to me, have you ever been to rehab? Have you ever thought about rehab? It was a judge, and it took that judge to see something in me that I couldn't even see in myself. I can remember when I went to rehab, I introduced myself and I went, I'm Charlie, I'm a junkie shoplifter from Leeds. And now when I left, I went, I'm Charlie, I'm kind, I'm compassionate, I'm caring, I've got empathy, and I want to help others.
Women are failed by services because essentially services are designed for men and boys. So women are expected to fit into those services, but those services are not designed to meet their needs.
The more you treat a woman as if she is worthwhile, the more she begins to internalise it and believe it. That makes it easier for her to advocate for herself.
The days after I left prison, mostly, the last 3 times especially, I was released homeless. So you end up just going to trap houses, so you end up using, and you're just on that cycle again. You're trying to straighten your life out and sort your life out, and nothing seems to be easy. If things were in place to make it more smoother, if services were more interlinked and working together, it'd help women.
When services work in silos, they are not able to receive the full picture of a woman's experience. So if we think of it like a jigsaw, if you just have a piece, then it only tells you a small story. But when you put all the pieces together, you get a full picture, and then you're able to provide the most appropriate and most adequate support for that woman.
Women have many ideas which are hidden underneath them, but they believe they will be judged, they will be harassed by it, so they prefer to keep quiet. So if women can be heard, if they can give them the chance, I believe the system will change. We want to be respected.
We want to be heard.
Still love that film so much. Right, I'm going to hand over to Nina now from Agenda Alliance.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm just gonna get my bits up. Bear with me 1 second. Okay. Has that worked? You see that properly? Yeah, okay. So I'm just gonna start by telling you a little bit about us, and yeah, it's just really nice to watch that film again. I just always feel really proud of the women in it whenever I see it. So I hope you enjoyed it. Agenda Alliance is a charity working across England and Wales, which exists to make a difference to the lives of women and girls at the sharpest edge of inequality, as we said. And we advocate for women and girls with multiple interconnected needs that aren't being met by public services, and also sometimes by voluntary organisations. Our work focuses on the experiences of women and girls who have experienced significant levels of poverty, abuse and trauma, often that's intergenerational or beginning in childhood. We conduct research, develop policy and campaign so that systems and services can better meet their needs. And some of these headlines kind of give you an idea of some of the topics we work across. It includes violence against women and girls, racism and racial justice, criminalisation, homelessness, mental health, and our work exists to kind of highlight how these things are so often interconnected and interlinked, and at the root, the cause is often driven by trauma. So working in a trauma-informed way and advocating that others should too is therefore really fundamental to what we do. And I know Emma's going to talk a bit also about trauma-informed practice shortly, but I'm kind of going to give you an overview of like what that means to us. So I wanted to start by saying, you know, it's really key to see people as the experts in their own life, as Emma kind of already mentioned briefly. It's also a core value of ours at Gender Alliance that we co-produce everything that we do, as Emma mentioned, in order to kind of really centre the voices of women and girls with lived experience of the topics that we're working on. And we aim to do that at all levels of our work. And for us, that's about shifting the balance of power. We see women as the experts in their own lives. And as hopefully that film showed, we know that when their voices and experiences are properly heard, that's when the most effective solutions to their challenges can be built. So I would say that, like, for all of you thinking about how to make ethical films, or working in a trauma-informed way, this is the kind of first fundamental pillar of really doing that. You have to be willing and ready in a kind of really meaningful way to truly listen to whoever's in front of you. You can't want to kind of pigeonhole them or like shoebox them into some kind of messaging that you've already imagined, or want them to fit into a one-size-fits-all approach. Everyone has different needs depending on their history, the context that they grew up in, their age, their gender, their cultural or faith background. And so, yeah, a one-size-fits-all approach that you can't adapt. It's okay to have a framework that you work from initially and that you can kind of flex and adapt. That's great. But not having any adaptability at all just will never be trauma informed, because you can't be responsive to who's in front of you. So see people as the experts and be willing to kind of respond to that. Kind of wanted to start from here. Like, you want to make an ethical film, where should you begin? Think about, like, what organizational policies and practice, if any, do you already have? A Gender Alliance already had a really strong track record of trauma-informed working with women and girls across our research, our media work, and our campaigning, but we just had never made a film before. And so this meant that although we wanted the support of a production agency, the Saltways, to help us shape the concept and produce the film, we already had some internal policies and experience to draw on. And that was particularly important for me as the kind of main project coordinator. It meant that there was buy-in from across my organisation all the way up to the CEO. And that meant when things had to adapt or shift a bit, there was real understanding around why that was necessary, and a commitment across kind of all members of the team to doing things really well. So if working in a trauma-informed or kind of ethical way is newer or more aspirational to you, and this isn't something you already have, I'd really build in time to your project plan to kind of do some research, consider your approach based on your organization, like, your budget, your team size, your capacity, and put some of this in place kind of before you even get to the like production questions of like how you want to make a film, both so the work's well supported by others in your organization, and also you're not outsourcing your responsibility for doing things well, because alongside our safeguarding policy, we also have a written approach to co-production, or working with women and girls, which I think Emma's going to share in the chat for you to see. And I was able to bring that to our work with the Saltways, like at the very beginning of the process, kind of both to like set expectations of how we work and to give Emma some of that context for our approach. And that was a really useful tool for us to then talk through and decide, once we'd kind of broken down the production process and into all of the different steps, to think about how we were going to actually like do those things in practice and the different resources that we'd need. And one of the things that we did together that was really helpful was we developed a specific set of ethical principles for this exact project, where we looked at each stage and we outlined how we were going to stay true to both the way that the Saltways works and their values and our approach at a Gender Alliance. And yeah, as I said, how we were going to do that at every step of the process. So yeah, start there. Kind of what do you already have, and what do you maybe need to go away and learn a little bit more about? My next tip is you can either do it quickly or you can do it right. And yeah, I just say this because, our project took a year from the first, step of reaching out to the Saltways and to launching the film this March. And we definitely could have done it a bit faster than this. There were, parts of the process that could have been definitely sped up. But as a general rule, I think it's a good kind of just something to hold in mind, that working fast and co-producing work in a truly trauma-informed way don't really go hand in hand. You need to feel confident that you are genuinely giving people the time and the space to make decisions that feel right for them. And when people have busy or complicated lives, they might need more time than the kind of quote unquote average person. And as might have been clear from the film we just showed you, and like some of the headlines that I shared before, the women and girls that a gender alliance works with are really juggling a lot. You know, they might be in touch with multiple different professionals about support that they need. They might be raising kids alone. They might be managing mental health needs or a disability, like all sorts of different things. And it means that no matter how enthusiastic they are about working with us, the likelihood is that we're just not their first priority, and our project isn't their first priority. And expecting them to be like really responsive and kind of giving us answers and being available kind of as and when we would want them to be, that's just unfair and kind of not acknowledging the reality of their lives. I think another thing to flag that's really important in terms of kind of ethical questions is factoring in things like neurodivergence. Means that people might take longer to process different kinds of information, or they might want to talk things through with somebody before making a decision. And, you know, I don't know what sectors you'll work across and kind of what kinds of people you might be thinking of working with to make a film, but you know, neurodivergence kind of shows up everywhere, so it's something to hold in mind. You might also have to use different ways of communicating for different people, so adapting information from an email kind of into a simple flyer with some simple graphics, or, you know, maybe somebody might prefer having a WhatsApp voice note. All of that takes extra time and capacity to do. So yeah, building that into kind of your project planning can be really helpful. In terms of the actual process and, you know, what time it took and kind of what we did, we started the project by doing a series of co-production sessions, one with our team, one with representatives from 10 of our alliance organisations, and then we moved on to 2 co-production sessions with 2 groups of women engaged through, again, 2 of our organisations, Pecan and Lancashire Women, who were kind of thanked in the film. And those sessions helped us decide the key messaging and the content that we wanted to make sure we focused on in the film. After that, the Saltways developed these concept options, and we took those back again to the 2 groups of women to hear their views and to hear kind of which of those concepts they liked the best. And luckily there was a really unanimous kind of favourite, so that made our decision really easy. But I suppose, you know, again, if there was quite a mixed response to the different concepts, you might need to kind of think about how you're going to integrate those differing views and make sure that you're really kind of hearing that and responding to different people's feedback. From there, we had to confirm our contributors and the 2 women who wanted to actually go on camera and be filmed, and that wasn't a quick process. Again, it obviously depends what the focus of your work is, but in our case, we work with women who've experienced really high levels of stigma. You know, Charlie talked about that and the impact that it's had on her in the film. Judgment and exclusion, and we just can't have any expectations that whatever we do and however safe we, you know, make that process feel, that they will feel like it's worth it sharing their stories publicly. So it really, you know, took us a long time to confirm exactly who wanted to be in the film, and yeah, that was another thing that yeah, just pulled the timeline out slightly. So connected to that, it's really all about trust. And if you want people to share anything with you, whether that's opinions and perspectives to help shape the messaging of your film, or as I said, kind of actually going on camera to be part of it, they need to really know that they can trust you and the work that you're doing together. So part of that is about sharing really clear information in advance. And yeah, again, I'm sure Emma might kind of touch on some of this as well, you know, about what the purpose of a space is in a way, again, that they can understand is really important. And once you're in that space, it's also really crucial to have thought critically about what information you're asking people for and why. For us, it was really important to make clear that women could share as much or as little information as they wanted to, that we didn't have expectations they were going to have to divulge their whole life story or kind of go into loads of detail about really traumatizing experiences. Because when people have had to have a lot of contact with support services, they've often been asked to recount their experiences over and over again. And so being trauma informed means not repeating that, and giving people choice over what they want to share. Another thing that really helps build trust is having a single point of contact that contributors can get to know or that they potentially already know. That's really important. That might be your producer, but I happened to also be in touch with the women that we worked with all the way through, and really built strong relationships with them. So yeah, just consider who that point of contact might be. Like, will it be the producer of the film? Will it be somebody else in the team who has kind of specific experience that's important? Yeah. And I think that also connects to the next point, which is, what are you doing to signal that you either understand or have made efforts to learn about people's context, experience, and needs? How are you showing that the questions you're asking them aren't random, but connected to what you know about them and the subject that you're talking about? If we all think about the spaces that we've been in, maybe if we can see that somebody kind of understands who we are and isn't saying things that are irrelevant to us, that helps us like trust the space. So how are you signaling that you know how to do that? And how are you showing that you really care about keeping them safe within this process? So for example, one of the women that we worked with had experience of the immigration system. So we had to put additional safeguarding in place to make sure that her participation in the film would be really safe. We asked her initially, did she want to be involved? And she said yes. And she didn't kind of explicitly bring up that aspect of her experience, but because we knew about it and she had shared some of that information, we wanted to make sure that there wasn't going to be anything that would potentially impact her safety. So obviously, like with her consent and through a discussion with her, we asked if we could go and speak to an immigration solicitor, and just check that, going on camera or doing anything else wouldn't impact her negatively. And that, again, I think signaling that we cared about doing that and that we really wanted to kind of cross those T's and dot those I's supported her to feel safer within the process. So, the overarching point, I guess, is that everybody is different, and make sure that you're actively making space for people to tell you what works best for them, and that you kind of care about those differences and you understand them. So finally, be prepared for things to change. Emma kind of flagged this as well. So our chosen approach to the film focused on filming with two women who had been part of our co-production sessions. They'd worked to build the key messaging and choose the concepts, and it was important to have that through line all the way through. And one contributor originally said she wanted to be part of the film and then changed her mind really close to one of our kind of planned shoot days. And this kind of brought up the tension that can exist sometimes around truly meaningful consent. She was telling us that she wanted to be part of the film and that she was really, keen to be involved and excited about the project, but there was also clearly some hesitation about kind of moving on to the practicalities of talking about the detail of the production. And it took kind of like responding to that and naming that, and to help her feel safe to say, actually, I don't want to do this. I don't feel comfortable about moving on to the shoot day. And it meant that we had to delay shooting in order to find another contributor, and also kind of have those conversations in a way that were ethical and safe and trauma informed, and didn't pressure them or rush them into participating. And that was obviously quite stressful for me, but ultimately it was much more important that she felt able and safe to tell us that she didn't want to go ahead, and she didn't end up being in a film that she didn't want to be in, or that would present her in a way that she didn't feel comfortable sharing with the world. It was so much more kind of positive for me that she felt like she trusted us to say that and vocalize it than for her to be in the film. So yeah, that's the kind of closing remark. And happy to kind of take Q&As about any like more specific details about the process. But I think, yeah, the ultimate kind of overarching thing is you have to be flexible and you have to be willing to kind of be responsive to what people bring to you and have the messaging of your film change on the basis of that, and not kind of be fixed to any single particular outcome. So yeah, I'll leave it there. And yeah, as I said, I'm really happy to take any more questions. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks, Nina. Yeah, I think as well, the thing that was really just came through when working with the Gender Alliance was that they really truly did put the contributors at the heart of everything from the beginning. And also Nina was really good at just thinking about those different scenarios of, okay, but then what if this happens, like at each stage? Because I think because of her extensive experience of working in this sector with women with lived experience of extreme trauma, that she kind of already had anticipated that we might have some hurdles. So it was sort of, well, this might happen, so let's think of an alternative as well at the same time. Yeah, and I think just throughout, the women were always put at the center of everything, which was just such a joy to kind of be involved in that sort of approach. So for us, when we're talking about trauma-informed practice in terms of videos and content creation, first thing you need to do is to really create safe spaces and boundaries, and the boundaries should be set by the people that you're working with. So you should be able to say to them, the safe space is between you and them, so that there's that trust there, or with you and the rest of the crew as well. So they should have the opportunity to meet any of the crew beforehand, whether it's online or whether it's in person, to create a safe space there. And then they also should be able to set boundaries. So it could be, I don't want to speak about this. I don't want to be filmed in a room with a door closed. I don't want to do this in the morning. I don't want to be filmed anywhere that you could recognize that it's where I live. Those are things that you should be asking, and just letting them set that, and make sure you ask those questions as well, because it might be that there's certain people that people aren't comfortable or haven't been asked those questions before. So it is important just to say, I always say hundreds of times to people when we work with them is, you are in control of this. You are totally in control of every stage of the way. So if there's anything you're not comfortable with, tell us. Or equally, if there's anything you're really passionate about and you want to speak about and you want to make sure it's included, that's equally as important and should be recognised. Secondly is just make sure people are supported throughout, and that means that you don't just have that touch point on the day in terms of how they are, or if anything is triggering to them or they need any support. It's before, during and after. And I know Nina especially was really good at touching base with all the contributors to make sure that they were comfortable and that support was offered throughout. And I think, Nina, you'd even put it in the budget, hadn't you, that there'd be touch points that they would have that support throughout, which again I think is really important, that it is offered and it is included as part of your budget. And also, just even when you're filming people, just saying to them, having a few different breaks, especially if they're talking about something particularly traumatic, is, just saying, are you okay to carry on? Like, is everything okay? Or do you want to have a little break, or do you want to do some of it now and then come back and do a little bit more? Yeah, just it's support throughout the process. Mutually beneficial as well. So I think there's quite a lot of conversation in the sector at the moment about whether people should be reimbursed for their time. I believe they should be, and I don't think that might not necessarily be, we'll pay you £50 an hour. It might be, we'll cover your expenses and we'll get you a voucher for something, or we'll pay you £15 for whatever. But I do think that there needs to be some sort of compensation for people's time, because if you were going to get in an expert of something, like a consultant, you wouldn't expect them to do that for free. And I think you should think about it the same way people with lived experiences, that they're bringing their expertise to your organisation. So they should be treated in the same way. I know that there is some difficulties with that. We've worked with people, asylum seekers, for example, and that can actually impact their being given financial contributions can impact their applications. But it could be, we'll give you a voucher for Tesco's or something like that, so they can still use it. I always as well just ask, is there anything you're interested in about the process that you'd like to know about? Or especially if we're working with groups of young people, they might really want to know about the filming and the editing, and just, is there anything they're interested in that they could be getting out of this as well? So just think about it as it should be mutually beneficial. And then of course anyone that's contributed should be given the opportunity to review anything that's created, that's stills, quotes, the edits, and they should always be told that as well. And I think that helps again build that trust, is that when you say to people, nothing will get released without your sign off. And again, that I think that helps people if they are feeling nervous about about sharing their story. And then this moves on to consent, which we've kind of talked a little bit about, but it must be easy to understand. So again, think about the people that you're working with. Is English their first language, or do you need to help with some translation? People with learning difficulties might have to have things put into easy read or explained really clearly to them. You need to be able to give a really detailed explanation as well of what it is you're asking them to do. So it shouldn't just be, can you be in a film? It should be, can you be in a awareness raising film that's going to be shown on this channel, on this channel, on this channel. We recently had an example where we're working with an organisation that worked with people with addiction, and someone who was in recovery said, yeah, great, I'll be in it, I'd love to share my story. And actually, when I explained to him that it was going to be on social media, he was like, oh, no one told me that before, and no, I don't want to do it because I don't want my family to see where I'm living at the moment. So I think as well, just making sure it not only protects them, but it protects you as well, because the worst thing would be, if you do release a film, you do release content, you've spent time and money on that, and then with the consent gets withdrawn. Obviously, it's not great for anybody. Make sure that they're able to withdraw it throughout. So again, that's a risk that you take by having a trauma-informed approach, but it's compulsory, I think. That you are at various points, you say, if you're uncomfortable or you want to stop this, at any point, just let us know. You're totally in control over this. And you're giving people control over what information is shared because it's theirs. So obviously they should have control and power over it. And then if consent isn't possible for whatever reason, then you must get assent. So if it's someone that isn't able to give their assent, then there needs to be someone who's responsible for them to actually give their consent on their behalf. But it should always be, basically, the takeaway is it should be ongoing and really transparent. And now I'm just going to show a film, which I know that a lot of people who are working in this field might not necessarily be able to film people's faces for whatever reason. So this is a film that we produced with a charity called the Bike Project. And the lady that we worked with on this was happy with certain parts of her body being filmed, but didn't want anything where it should be recognizable. So she consented to exactly what she could be seen. And we even showed her on the camera, like, we're going to film this part of your face. Are you happy with that? And we took a shot, and then she came back and looked at it. And she was in control of the whole shoot. She just was like, you're okay with this? I'm okay with that. And obviously she got to see it after to make sure she was comfortable with it. So I'm just going to show that now for you.
I came to the UK because it wasn't safe for me to be at home. When I got to London, I was put in a hotel by the Home Office, and they give you a specific document basically saying you shouldn't work until we decide on your case. So people are left in a limbo where you can't work, you can't do much. It was very heavy to see that there were so many people in need all the time. We were given £8 something a week. For me, I needed feminine products, for instance. That £8 was gonna all go to that week. If one day I traveled by bus, more than 80% of my money for the week's gone. You have to get to your appointment, so I walked to a lot of places. But yeah, it made it really hard for a lot of people. It was very isolating. After a few months of living in a hotel and not necessarily having a lot of control over my life, I ended up feeling really down and depressed. I felt like my life was out of control. I found out about the Bike Project. They teach women how to cycle. So that's how I learned to cycle. I was very excited. It's been a big goal of mine. I've always in my head just thought, when I see someone cycling, I'm like, that looks so cool. I think it is important for refugees and asylum seekers to have bikes because it's the quickest way to get around. It's the cheapest way to get around. It helps you mentally. It's the only form of transportation that I use, to be honest. It's been a huge mental benefit I didn't really have a lot of support system in place. So it was getting both that like physical activity, but also feeling connected to a community. And I think the bike project definitely does that. It helps you rebuild your life and kind of take control of it, I would say. Yeah.
So I'm just going to cut that short slightly at the end. But yeah, hopefully that gives you an idea of how you can still share someone's story by letting them be in control of what it is they want to share. And she didn't go into any of her background of why she was in the UK because she didn't want to. And I don't think the film lacked because of that. So yeah, here's just some sort of interview techniques that if you are interviewing people in a trauma-informed and ethical way. So plan in advance and prepare your questions beforehand, and obviously take the time to build that relationship with people before you do interview them. A little tip, and I always give people, I wouldn't give people the exact questions you're going to ask because that can make it feel a bit unauthentic. People get nervous and rehearse things over and over in their head, but give an overview of the kind of thing you're going to be asking them. So we're going to be asking you about this experience and this sort of messaging, and this is so they have an understanding of what it is you're going to be asking them, but it's not, this is the first question, this is the second question, this is the third question. Just a little thing about always be on eye level to people, so it's not like you're looking down on anyone with your camera, or you're kind of at the same level as them, and again that's a power thing. Ask open-ended questions is just a good thing of getting people to open up, because again they are there to share their story, and you need to give them, encourage them and support them to do that. So, and that helps by just asking questions, like, tell me about that experience, or if I was a fly on the wall at that time, what would I have seen? And then just the biggest one is just give space and time. So don't think you're going to be able to interview someone in 20 minutes. Like, we always give at least an hour for an interview, just to give people the space and time it deserves, and don't go straight into it. You do a few sort of questions about things that aren't anything to do with what you're going to be making the film about, but just again to build that relationship, let people relax. And yeah, sometimes it might help that you'll do a sit down interview with them and they're not quite feeling it, or they're a bit nervous, and then you can say, well, let's try something else, let's go for a walk, and then we'll do another interview and we'll ask you some more questions there. So yeah, it's being flexible, as I think we've said throughout, and just giving people space and time is really important. And that there will be emotional moments. There will be, and it might even be you that gets emotional. I always do when I'm interviewing people, and I always think it's more of a conversation than an interview. But yeah, so try and just stay calm and composed if anything does become emotional. Again, giving people the space and time. So if you do feel like someone's getting really upset, or something's triggering for them, just have a break, take 5, give them the opportunity to stop as well, or change the topic. Like, is this something, I can see you're a bit uncomfortable, would you rather I ask you something else? Offer support throughout, as I've said, and that should be ongoing. And yeah, it's just respecting people, and I think it's just coming back to that thing of putting them at the center of everything that you're doing. And then just finally, if you are asking people to share their own stories, using their phones normally is the most effective way to do this. There's some little tips of how you can do that. So firstly is to co-create, as I've talked about. So bring them in for the journey. Don't just say, we're looking for people who can film their story. I would reframe it as, this year we really want to increase our awareness so we can help more people similar to you. Would you be willing to share your story to help do that? And if they say yes, then you say, right, how do you think the best place to do, what would be the best way to do that? How would you like to share your story? What do you think is really important for people to know? And then give them guidance of like, okay, so this is the kind of thing we'd like you to capture. Share your skills, teach them things like use your phone like this way and your framing like this way. This is why we've edited it in this way. So again, you're kind of co-creating and making sure that they're in the journey with you, and then give them support and feedback. And then full circle, which I think a lot of charities miss, is just reporting back to them. So if it is a fundraising film, for example, going back to them in a month and saying, because of you, we raised £2,000, which means actually we're able to start this new service, or we're actually able to support this many people. I think it's just really important that they feel really valued and that they are part of the full process. So it's kind of coming back to that full circle of support and feedback. we have got Quaku's film now, which I'll just show you a tiny bit of, because I'm just conscious that we want to leave a bit of time at the end for questions. So this is Kwaku, who we worked on with a co-creative project with the charity Hear Me Out. And this was his idea, and he did all the filming. And it was around the fundraising campaign that was co-created with a group of people with lived experience around that asylum seekers should be seen as more than just a label.
Sometimes, like, people want to distance themselves away from you, and it makes you feel you don't belong here. It puts your soul down inside. You get into conversation with someone very nice, very beautiful. You talk about career, you talk about work, you talk about your visions, your potentials. And the next question is like, wait, all that you saying, what are you doing now? Like, you can't do anything now because you're an asylum seeker. It's kind of like you've been trapped in a space where nothing's working for you. My name is Kwaku, and I'm from Ghana, and I was a 10. I tried my very best to have a positive impact in my society.
Yeah, so I can send you the link to watch the whole of that film, but and there was a few others made from the same group of people that we worked with on that. But yeah, that's it from us. But yeah, hopefully there's enough time now for us to answer any questions that you have. By all means, just pop it in the chat, or you can turn your camera off, raise your hand, whichever works best for people.
Maybe whilst people are thinking of questions, I've just remembered one point that I should have included in my presentation, which is that thinking about how to like ethically make a film isn't just about how you treat your contributors, but also about like the team that you're using, and both how you treat them and also what they look like and their experiences too. So like for us, we needed to have an all-female team because of the kinds of experiences that the women that we were working with were going to be talking about and feel safe to share around. And then also it was really important for us to kind of like live our anti-racist and feminist values in terms of how we built that team. So thinking about, it not just being an all-white team, that there were women of color on the production team, and that would also support women of color who may be engaged to be part of the spaces that we worked in. So I think thinking about that as well, of kind of, who are you engaging, who's represented in your film, and also who is represented in the team that you're building, and kind of different experiences there as well. Just wanted to mention that briefly.
Yeah, I think that's really important, especially just giving people the option of an all-female team as well is really important. Someone has asked in the chat consent, whether you need a consent form or if verbal is enough. I would definitely say you need to have a form as well. I think just verbal probably isn't going to cover it, but I don't know, what do you think, Nina?
Yeah, I would say definitely have a form, and also we did additional risk assessments as well at our end, kind of part of what I was talking about, of like just making sure we'd thought of everything in terms of people's different needs and their kind of the safety questions.
Yeah, Sarah Hutchinson, you've got a question?
Yeah, hi. Yeah, really good presentation. We've made a couple of films, but with production company. We're looking at making a film at the moment around improving empathy in services for the community we support, which is migrant women. But I'm looking at doing that very DIY now. We were going to have someone support us, but that's fallen through. I have no experience of doing it on phones. I was just wondering if you had any kind of practical advice. So obviously the filming and videoing of women's stories, possibly, obviously looking at co-producing that with them. But actually, how do we turn that into a film, basically? Is there any kind of apps or any way you could direct me to learn how to do that?
Yeah, when are you planning to film it?
Well, I guess in the next 6 months or so,
Okay.
probably. Probably engaging with the women first and getting, really, like you've just spoken about, being very trauma informed about it and, really working through their involvement in it. And then probably from September, I would think we'd be looking at
Because I was
actually
going to
filming.
mention, yeah, I was going to send it in the follow-up email, but we do a free monthly workshop on how to create content using phones, and that covers
Oh,
more
great.
the technical side of things. So the next one I think is at the end of June. So
Great.
I would come along to that, and then that should give you enough to get you started. But I think when you're asking people to film their own content, we just tend to stick to like some really key things. So sound, natural light, making sure you're capturing an atmosphere and framing. And so we don't want to overwhelm people with too much technical stuff. If it's you filming it, then obviously you can take a bit more time with the technical side of things. But if you're asking people to capture their own stuff, we always just say the content's king. So even if it isn't perfect, if the story's strong enough and they feel comfortable with it, then that should probably do most of the work. And then, yeah, in that workshop we go through some like free editing software and stuff. So, yeah, that should be. I think they would give you a really good start if you came along to that.
Brilliant. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for
No
that.
problem. Iman, you had a question?
Yep. Hi, everyone. That was really, really useful. I just wanted to ask a question about, so you mentioned how you should always give whoever is contributing their right to withdraw their consent throughout the whole process. And I wanted to ask how you would deal with the scenario of like post-production and when everything has kind of been released, then someone withdrawing their consent. And just obviously to give you a little bit of context, so I work for a small charity in Newham, and we work with a lot of refugees, asylum seekers. I'm the comms person, so this isn't just for filming. This is also for sometimes we have publicity materials that will be worked on and will be used for the next 3 years. And I've always had that kind of question that someone's giving consent, but what if they decide afterwards and they take it back? What advice would you have?
I mean, I think it's never happened to us. And I think that's probably because we have a really rigorous consent process beforehand. So we would like, as Nina said, that they with Ola, that was a concern because of her refugee status. So it was something that they as an organization sort of checked with her. I think it's just about that transparency. So you need to take more time than you would in other situations, making sure people really fully understand what it is this is going to be used for. And flag things like this is going to be for 3 years. So just be aware that, if things change in your circumstances, like, are you going to be comfortable with this still being used? And it's worth spending that time really being transparent and making sure you get their fully informed consent before you even start gathering any sort of content to reduce the risk of that being withdrawn after. But unfortunately, it is a risk, and there's only so many things you can do to mitigate that. But I think it's still just essential that people are given the opportunity to withdraw it because it's their story. So you don't want to put people at risk. But yeah, what did you think, Nina, about that?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, and I'm sure you already like do a lot of this already, but one thing that I find really helpful when having conversations with people about consent is like really offering them a concrete scenario. So rather than being like, are you comfortable with this in this setting, this setting, this setting? Are you comfortable with it now? What about in 6 months? Being like, okay, you're not currently working at the moment, but say if in 6 months you got a job, would you feel comfortable with your new co-workers like seeing this film somewhere on the internet? And I think giving that really kind of like visualized concrete example can really help people think through. I think Emma, you gave an example as well about somebody in recovery and their family. Like that can really help connect the dots of like, okay, what am I actually thinking about here and the decision that I'm having to make. So yeah, that might just be one route forward. But yeah, it's just true. I mean, if somebody comes later down the line and retracts consent, it's
Yeah,
not
it's
easy.
tricky, but thank you so much. That's really useful. And I do agree. I think having that transparency and kind of constantly allowing them to kind of know where it's going to be, how long it's going to be a public for is really useful. Thank you so much.
No problem. Jade in the chat has said, we're a baby loss charity, so many of our families we support wouldn't be feel comfortable in content, being in content, and most families will never get a chance to meet. Do you have any ideas of how else we can get powerful content? I think that if you can't have people tell their stories, you can still have that emotional and emotive and real content. Usually, I would ask staff or volunteers or support staff to tell stories of people that that aren't going to be identifiable. That's them, but they could be general enough so they could say, a day in the life of content is really good. So you could have someone who's a support worker filming stuff on their phone, saying, just getting in a car, saying, just been to see this family, it's so awful, and this is what they're going through. And I was so happy that I could do this as part of my job, and I could go and cuddle them, and I could go and tell them that there's this that exists, and I was able to give this bit of support and this piece of advice to them. So I think you can still have really powerful content without actually speaking to contributors. You can also do things like we did with the bike project, where even if they're not happy with their faces being filmed or anything, it might be that they're happy to share their story, and then you could have a voiceover with text, or animation as well is another way you can get around it. But I think try and find other people in your organization that can tell those stories in a way that doesn't put anyone at risk of being identified is a really good way around that. Henny, did you have a question?
I think you've just sort of answered it. Yeah, I also work with an organization that they do like mentoring for young girls, teenage girls, and in the mental health space for mental health. And I work in a very, very insular community, and everyone knows everyone. So no one wants to be recognized. No one needs their neighbors, friends, the whole town knowing what's been going on in their family. So I guess, yeah, the advice you just gave would apply to us, using staff and using volunteers to share their stories, or animation videos actually is also a good idea, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean as well, I think there's something you can lean into that as well. And almost you could even do content around what you've just said. So you could say you might notice on our social media that actually you don't see many stories. And that's because we protect and we always put the interest of the people that we support, and we don't want at the heart of everything we do. And you could actually make that your thing, like we don't share stories directly, but actually we can tell you about the impact we have in different ways. Yeah, Nina, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, just a couple of different points, which is that, not specific to a film, but a media piece we did was we do a lot of work around women in prison, and one of our organizations work specifically with Muslim women in prison who have kind of similar kind of needs to what you described, Henny, of like just community concerns around being identified, and often kind of quite small communities. And we did a piece on radio where this young woman's story was shared with a actor's voice. So yeah, the kind of different ways of anonymizing content can be really good. And also I was just going to say that if you still want to involve those young girls in kind of a co-production process, one thing that I did with our Women's Advisory Network was they create some voiceover, and then we chose the kind of imagery, and like we had some stock video imagery and then other imagery that I edited together to make a little bit of a kind of video clip. And so that might be one way that those young women could be involved in like the creative process of what a film looks like, but they're just not necessarily like on screen. So yeah, that was just another idea maybe that.
Thank you. And was like the voice, you had somebody else doing the voice?
So in that case, they felt comfortable it being their own voices. But yeah, again, like, I could have re-recorded it in my own voice, or a different staff member could have, or something like that we could have done if they would have preferred.
Thanks. All right.
There's also some amazing AI software now that you could actually probably sit down with some young people and they could create their own story using AI, and they would be totally in control of that. And I think as long as you're transparent about that when you shared it, saying this has been created with AI, but it's been worked on with people with lived experience, that could be a way that you could do that as well. We're over time, but I think we've got enough time for maybe two more questions. So there's one in the chat that is, how do you work with interpreters where English is not the expert's first language? And how do you embed trust building, discretion, and other values in a three-way collaboration like this? I don't know if this is relevant, but we've just filmed actually 2 films recently, where one was with a lady who has a severe disability. So we filmed with her and her support worker, and the support worker kind of acted as her voice because she knows her so well, and kind of they've got a very deep relationship. So actually, we decided to film the 2 of them together. And similarly, we're working just filming a project at the moment where it's someone who's deaf, and instead of having it sort of their support worker who tells us what they're saying through sign language, we actually just filmed them both together. So it just felt like you could see that relationship and there was that trust there. So that might be a way around it. But I mean, I would just have the translator. If you need a translator, they should be there at every step of the way. So they build that trust and relationship with the translator and you as an organization or as a production company, but that there's a consistency that translator will be there in all the pre-production meetings, on set, helping them look at the edit after. Like, it shouldn't just feel like they're sort of in and out of the process. It should be that they're a consistent throughout, and I think that would help build the trust. Yeah, I guess if we go last question, Sylvia.
Thanks. It was similar to Iman's, actually. I really enjoyed your presentations, by the way, both of you, and I think interspersing them with the actual videos is really, really helpful to bring it to life. It was about with consent being withdrawn post-production. It is awful for the company that needs it, and especially, for example, you showed Charlie and Ola. They're both spliced into the same video, and if one of them withdraws consent, you've kind of lost your whole video. It's a tough one, but it has to be done. And I understand what you say, Nina, about saying, well, you can walk them through it in advance to say, well, what in 6 months' time you're in this scenario, will you be comfortable? But at the end of the day, people's situations change, and then they think differently about it. So I had an example many years ago now where somebody had been in prison and he was in the case study. And he had a new girlfriend, he had a new life, new job, he'd been to college, his life had turned around, and he didn't want to dwell on that part. He didn't want it out there on the internet. So he got hold of me and asked to withdraw that consent, which was, perfectly understandable. If you are putting them at the center of their own story, that is fine. You've got to do it, even though you're kind of thinking, oh no, please. And another example was somebody dying. So their family don't want it out there as a reminder of whatever it is that happened. So these things do happen, even if they gave properly informed consent at the time. We do have to accept that they might well change their minds. But also, it was just a big reason because somebody asked earlier about consent forms, not just verbal. If it is a form, you just have to make sure that they get the copy, because GDPR demands that they have the right to withdraw consent. They need to know where to go to, who to contact. And yes, they can lose the piece of paper or their online or whatever it is, but at least you've tried. Whereas if you just ask them verbally and you walked away, they don't know how to get back to you. So It was a comment rather than a question, but I think they were really important. But I did want to thank you very much. I thought it was a really, really informative session. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. And yeah, both really. And it's really helpful, I think, to hear your experiences as well. And I just think it is a risk, but the content that you get and the way that and working in this way is worth it, I feel. Brilliant. Okay, well, I'm going to go because we're running over, but thank you all so much. And we'll send over the recording. I'll also send you a link to get a PDF that we create about how to create content using your phone as well. And I'll include the link that Nina sent earlier too, so you can have a read on their website about their practices. But yeah, thank you all so much, and we'll see you again.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.